Welcome back, guys. I trust you've been staying safe. Now, on New Year's Day in 2022, a house in South Africa was engulfed in intense flames. All efforts by the fire service to mitigate this fire proved futile, and in the end, the whole house was consumed. When the flames were eventually doused, one male victim was retrieved from the wreckage. Now, this house belonged to a couple by name Sibusiso Mahlangu and Lerato Mahlangu. For those of you who are not familiar with the tribal names and the African connotations, Sibusiso Mahlangu is the husband to the wife by name Lerato Mahlangu. Now, the remains of the victim that were retrieved were obviously determined upon assessment to be that of the husband. So this seemed like an open and shut case, and as a result, everybody moved on. The remains of the husband were buried and life continued. But was this an open and shut case? Well, the whole country was in for a surprise when, few months down the line, the man who was determined to have died in the fire and had been buried after a massive funeral with all family members present was apprehended driving a stolen car. This is the true crime story of how a couple proved how bonded they are and how united they are in love as in crime, and were prepared to pursue, execute, and connive to the very end, to the demise of another person. Before you appreciate the details of this true crime story, it will be important that I take you to the very beginning, the genesis of how things unraveled to the point where the fire engulfed the house, and then you begin to appreciate how the man who was determined to have perished in the fire managed to find his way back into a stolen car and got apprehended by the police. So the whole story starts within the late 2000s, where a young lady by name Lerato ended up getting into a relationship with another man by name Sibusiso Sithebe. Please take note of the names because it is very critical in this true crime story. This is not a movie, but by the end of this narration, you will think that this is a perfect movie script. It's coming from South Africa and is still in court as at date. Lerato was working in an insurance company, and she was dating a young man by name Sibusiso Sithebe. Now, Lerato and Sibusiso Sithebe's relationship seemed normal. They even graduated to the point where they had a kid together. But unfortunately, the relationship couldn't work. So at a point in time, they broke up. Take note that they never got married. They were just in a dating relationship, and then they ended up having a child. Now, at this point, after the breakup, Lerato vetoed her way to take custody of their child and placed measures in place to ensure that she had cut off the father of the child, Sibusiso Sithebe, from ever seeing his own child or having any relationship with him. This was not a decision made by any legal body. She just vetoed it and she did it. And all efforts that Sibusiso Sithebe tried just so he could get access to his child proved futile. This really broke Sibusiso Sithebe's heart, but he was trying to still move on. Now, another strange bit is how both of these guys moved on from this relationship. Bear in mind, Lerato is the lady, and she was dating a guy called Sibusiso Sithebe, and she has had a kid with this guy, and they've broken up and they've gone their separate ways. Now, when they went their separate ways, Lerato eventually ended up dating another guy. The guy that she ended up dating has the same name as her ex-boyfriend. Yeah. Lerato broke up with Sibusiso Sithebe, but ended up dating a new guy called Sibusiso Mahlangu. And it's not just the name that Lerato ex and her new boyfriend shared. No, they also shared a resemblance. They had some striking features in common. Now, on the flip side, when Lerato's ex-boyfriend Sibusiso Sithebe also left the relationship after being abandoned by Lerato, he also ended up getting into a relationship with another lady by name Lerato Mahlangu. Now, someone would say that, these guys were never over each other, because what are the odds that the two of you broke up from a relationship and you entered into new relationships with people bearing the same names as your exes? But some way, somehow, that was what happened. With Sibusiso Sithebe, Lerato's ex, and his new fiancée, Lerato Mahlangu, they were on the highway of love. Things were really working out for them, and they had a kid of their own. Mind you, all this while, Lerato had denied Sibusiso Sithebe access to the child that he had with her before they broke up. But Sibusiso Sithebe was trying to move on. Now, Lerato and her husband, Sibusiso Mahlangu, were now also thick as thieves. They had gotten married. Lerato had gotten married to her new boyfriend, Sibusiso Mahlangu, and they were thick as thieves. She had now taken on his surname, and they were also trying to carve a life for themselves. So it seemed like these couples had moved on. But had they? No, one of them hadn't. Because, like I mentioned earlier, Lerato, the ex of Sibusiso Sithebe, worked with a reputable insurance company in South Africa. And some way along the line, she hatched a plan with her now husband, Sibusiso Mahlangu, on how to cash out thousands of dollars from life insurance earnings. So it turns out that this new boyfriend of Lerato, who eventually became her husband, Sibusiso Mahlangu, had a criminal background, allegedly. And together, they were able to hatch a plan on how to take advantage of the insurance company where Lerato worked. But they needed a patsy. What was the scheme? They needed to defraud the company and actually defraud the entire country through insurance fraud and cash out. Now, to start off the plan, Lerato Mahlangu took out a life insurance policy on her husband, Sibusiso Mahlangu, to the tune of several thousands of dollars. The next step required that her husband had to pass on. He had to be deceased. But he wasn't ready to be deceased because he wants to enjoy the money that they will get from this fraud. So there is no way he was going to sacrifice himself so his wife alone will enjoy the money. So that was when they discovered that they would need a patsy. And some way, somehow, Lerato Mahlangu felt that the perfect person to be used as the patsy in this crime that they were plotting was going to be her ex-boyfriend, Sibusiso Sithebe, who also happens to be the father of her child. Talk about being cold-hearted. So, they hatched the plan. Now they needed to execute. They set up the life insurance policy. Lerato set it up herself because she's a staff of the company, so it wasn't difficult for her to get it done. And she didn't set it up fraudulently. She ensured that she had set it up in a legal manner, to the point that everything is on point, because it has to be validly set up for them to be able to make a valid claim when their plan gets to fruition. So they set up the policy, and then they got up to work, moving about the dominoes to perfect their crime. Now, the question was, Lerato had dumped her ex-boyfriend Sibusiso Sithebe several years ago and even denied him access to his child. How was she now going to get him to become comfortable around her enough to let his guard down, enough to end up being used as the patsy for their fraud scheme? Well, allegedly, Lerato felt that she had the perfect bait in place, and that was their child. The same child that she had denied Sibusiso Sithebe access to over the years since they broke up. And she set about her plan. She called Sibusiso Sithebe out of the blue after several years of silence and sincerely ensuring that he is not reaching her in any way. She now called him out of the blue, and she told him that he needs to meet and reconnect with his child. This seemed out of the blue, but Sibusiso Sithebe was excited. For me, I think that should have been the first red flag. I respect how Sibusiso Sithebe may not have detected or have been prompted that this is a red flag, because he is a father longing to have a relationship with his child, and he's been starved of that by the child's mother, who is his ex in the person of Lerato. And that's how come she knew it would work. So she used the kid to bait him, and she didn't make it easy. She baited him and still disappointed him severally, to the point that Sibusiso Sithebe reportedly was broken. His spirit was down. He was so down. Lerato allegedly would call him and schedule a meeting with him, but she would then disappoint him, or she would cancel and reschedule. Someone would say that she was just stringing him on and making him test more to have that relationship with the child, so that on the D-Day, when it's all good to go and they have the green light, he will come rushing in to be used as a patsy without his notice. But I think that it's possible that during the times that she had to reschedule the appointment for him to meet his child, probably it's because the other workings behind the scenes that they were pulling, which would be used to unalive him, were not yet in place, or there was a hitch somewhere. That's my suspicion. But then, fast forward. After several weeks of disappointing Sibusiso Sithebe, Lerato called him again and told him that she had found a job for him. Now, Sibusiso Sithebe, in as much as his relationship with his new girlfriend, Lerato Mahlangu, was thriving and they had a kid, he was not that sound financially, but he was reportedly a very hardworking and diligent gentleman, and he was ready to put in extra work just so he can fend for his family. So when Lerato said this, he obliged to go and meet this so-called new employer and then see how things go from there. Now, this call to Sibusiso was supposed to be the second red flag, and per his fiancée's account after his passing, she said that he was acting funny. It's almost as if he knew something was going to happen to him after that call. And their kid was also acting very weird during that period, to the point the kid even took his phone and threw it in the drain. Almost as though the kid could sense that a phone call will come through on that phone, and it might end up leading to the unaliving of this kid's dad. But the phone got blocked in the drain and he was able to pick it up. There were so many strange things that were happening within this period where Lerato was trying to lure Sibusiso Sithebe to his untimely demise, but some way, somehow, it didn't deter him. And I think it's because he was being driven by the hunger to reconnect with his child. And in that case, he wouldn't be thinking straight. He wouldn't be thinking straight. He was already flawed in his thinking from the start. And I think Lerato demonstrated the coldest of behaviors. Fast forward, Sibusiso said goodbye to his fiancée and went to meet this so-called employer. He called his fiancée around 10 p.m. and told her that he had met with this person and he'll be coming back afterwards. Unfortunately, that will end up being the last time anybody would hear from Sibusiso Sithebe. The next thing that people knew, there was this fire on New Year's Day in 2022, where a house was raging in flames, and this house belonged to Lerato Mahlangu, the ex of Sibusiso Sithebe, and her now husband, Sibusiso Mahlangu. So we are back to where we started. Now, efforts by the fire service to douse the flames before it got worse proved futile and the house burnt to the ground. When they searched the remains of the house, they saw the remains of a victim, and it was determined it was a male victim. And it was determined to an extent that it was the remains of Lerato's husband, Sibusiso Mahlangu. So then it meant that now she could go and claim this life insurance, because according to fire service reports and even police reports, her husband had lost his life in that fire. So she made the claim. She cashed out several thousands of dollars. And to even top it up, it's reported that the insurance company allegedly rebuilt the house for her. So she was the grieving widow. They had a very huge funeral for her husband. Her husband's family members also came. They filed past the body. Everything played out as would play out in every normal funeral. And they laid Sibusiso Mahlangu to rest. And everybody moved on. Lerato Mahlangu had finally succeeded in executing this plan. But little did the society know that she actually executed it with her husband, who is being presumed deceased and actually has had a funeral done for him. So behind the scenes, he was still alive and he was enjoying the money with Lerato Mahlangu. And this husband was also deceiving his own external family, his parents, his mom, his dad, his sisters, other siblings and relatives that he had passed. That is how twisted this couple were. It's almost as though they were made for each other. I don't know if some people are alleging that maybe it was the man who had the negative influence on the lady. Maybe it's Sibusiso Mahlangu who had that negative influence on his wife. And I'm tempted to believe that allegation to an extent because she had the access to the insurance company as a staff. So it would make more sense that she would be the one to be enticed into that plan. But then again, she could also be the one who hatched it all, because being an employee of the company, she would also know the loopholes and would be able to sit down and plot a fraud, taking advantage of those loopholes. So it could be here or there. But the world had moved on. The couple had been successful in their fraud and they had cashed out. And everybody thought Lerato Mahlangu was now a widow. Little did they know that she was just a pretending widow. She wasn't a real widow, because her deceased husband was actually alive. Now, the flip side of it was the family and fiancé of Sibusiso Sithebe were also fervently looking for him, to the point that they had lodged a missing persons report with the police, and all efforts to find him had proved futile. It had been about a year and nobody knew where Sibusiso Sithebe was. Investigations had commenced. They had been able to establish that his ex, Lerato, had reached out to him and he set off to meet somebody and all, but they couldn't go any further from that point because they couldn't find any evidence to suggest what had happened afterwards. So it was also a pending case. He had been also classified in the system as a missing person. Now fast forward several months afterwards, the police pulled over a man in a vehicle and requested to run some checks on this vehicle, as is normal per most police checkpoints. It turns out that this vehicle has been reported stolen. So it's automatic. Once you are found driving a stolen vehicle or being in possession of a stolen vehicle, obviously the police are going to arrest you, take you downtown, and engage you in a conversation to establish how come you came to be behind the steering wheel of this stolen vehicle, or you came to be in possession of this stolen vehicle. So that was exactly what happened. They picked up this man. And little did people know that after Sibusiso Mahlangu and his wife, Lerato Mahlangu, had faked his death, Sibusiso Mahlangu moved on and stole the identity of his wife's ex, Sibusiso Sithebe. They took his ID cards and that's what they were using. That's what he was using. So he was impersonating this guy. So when the police took him to the police station, they took his IDs, and because he has some resemblance to Sibusiso Sithebe, it was a bit easy for him to pretend he was him. But then, one thing would end up exposing it all. Guess what it was? Yeah, the running of biometrics through the system. Now the police took Sibusiso Mahlangu's biometrics. They didn't know at the time that he was Sibusiso Mahlangu. They just knew him as a man they had arrested driving a stolen car who has an ID saying that he is called Sibusiso Sithebe. But when they ran his biometrics, the system feedback was that he is Sibusiso Mahlangu and he is supposed to be deceased in a fire that engulfed the house that he owned with his wife, Lerato Mahlangu. Then the police got crazy. They were like, you are not supposed to be here. You're actually supposed to be in the spiritual world. How come you are here in the physical world with us, driving a stolen car? Then they were like, wait a minute. The feedback that the biometric system is giving us is that he's Sibusiso Mahlangu. But why is he also having an ID card bearing the name Sibusiso Sithebe? They decided to also run a background check on who Sibusiso Sithebe is, only to find out that Sibusiso Sithebe has also been reported as a missing person for over a year ago. Then the whole thing started coming together. The dominoes were falling apart and the whole house of cards went flying. As it will turn out, the couple, Lerato Mahlangu and Sibusiso Mahlangu, through Lerato Mahlangu, had lured Sibusiso Sithebe with that job offer and allegedly had managed to unalive him and then place him in their matrimonial bed. And then Lerato Mahlangu's husband, Sibusiso Mahlangu, allegedly took off his wedding ring, placed it on the finger of Sibusiso Sithebe, and then they allegedly set the house up in flames, at which point the fire service came in and it ended the way it ended. So the whole house of cards came crashing down and they got arrested. As it stands now, the case is still in court. They've been denied bail. And in another crazy twist, the stepfather of Lerato Mahlangu has also come to add a charge that she tried doing the same thing to him in the company of other thugs. So it turns out that this couple were ready to do everything together, whether it was good or bad. But unfortunately, they did only the bad things and they ended up doing this. As I was researching on this case, my heart sank, honestly. Because if you look at Sibusiso Mahlangu, the eventual husband of Lerato Mahlangu, he really didn't have anything to lose. For me, I'm suspecting he may have manipulated Lerato Mahlangu, but Lerato Mahlangu in herself, if she did all they are saying she did, is a whole different evil in itself. And even prior to her possibly being manipulated, I think that she was a whole package of evil in a premium way. Because how are you, first of all, able to break up with the father of your child and deny him complete access to this child? And deny this child access to the child's father? That is the first strike. And then moving on, you come back years later and you use this kid as a bait to lure the kid's father onto his untimely demise at the hands of yourself and this kid's stepfather. That is a whole level of crazy. Now, there are several charges leveled against them, and if they are found guilty, I don't think these guys are going to see the light of day. Because not only did they commit the insurance fraud, they also unalived Sibusiso Sithebe. They also deceived the system. They tried deceiving the system and a whole lot of things. So I'm following this case to see how it goes. But what do you think about this? What do you think are the forces driving this case? Do you think that Lerato Mahlangu is a victim here of Sibusiso Mahlangu, or you think they are both packaged individual evils in themselves and they came together to form a bigger form of evil? And what do you think of Sibusiso Sithebe? My heart really goes out to him and his family and loved ones. May he rest in peace, but I believe he will only be able to do that when justice is served. But the manner in which he had to go was just so unfortunate. And I'm hoping that the justice will be served swiftly and decisively. Let's have a conversation in the comment section. What do you think could have prevented this? What measures would you advise anybody going through such things to put in place? And these instances of life insurance leading to schemes like this in South Africa is becoming very rampant. If you have taken a life insurance policy, please be very careful who you disclose the information.